And I think with this full moon in Cancer is like, let's prioritize our needs. Like, no, this isn't about doing, everything and getting this and getting that, but what needs to be done right now? How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Astrology Report. My name is Cam White, and today we are talking about January 2nd through the 8th of 2023. Thank you guys so much for being here. I love and appreciate all of you. Make sure you like this video if you like it. Make sure you comment for the algorithm or let me know what your thoughts or opinions are on everything. We have quite a week ahead of us. Last week was just Mercury stationing retrograde and going into the new year, essentially. But now that we're fully locked into the new year, we're going to be here for the rest of the year. Things that we have going on this week. Venus is going to be ingressing into Aquarius. We have Venus making a sextile to Jupiter, which is looking pretty positive for the most part. We have the full moon in Cancer, as well as the Mercury Cazimi, and then we'll have Mercury retrograde making a trine to Uranus again. So quite a bit of action going on this week. It all looks, I would argue, positive. However, I would also argue overwhelming for certain people. So as we start this week off on Monday, we're going to be having the moon make a square to Saturn while it trines Mercury and Venus. Then later on in the afternoon, the moon will enter Gemini and it will make a trine to Venus as Venus enters Aquarius. So the big thing here is Venus and the moon essentially both enter a new sign at the exact same time. So Monday's got quite a bit going on. The number one thing is in the morning, the moon will be making a square to Saturn. So there will feel like this frustration. The moon in Taurus, we've been wanting to satiate ourselves, feel comfortable, feel stability. But as that square Saturn, that just doesn't work that way, right? Like Saturn in Aquarius is very like, this is me painting it in a very positive picture, but like sharing is caring. And the moon in Taurus making that square to Saturn, it's kind of like paying your taxes. Like you can't just have all of the money, you have to distribute it to, the populace in order to get your, roads, essentially. So there will feel like this feeling of like not wanting to give, not wanting to, be giving is probably the best word for it. And that will cause some frustration. But as the moon trines Mercury and Venus, there is this level of having the, it's one thing when you're just giving blindly and you don't really know what you're giving. But I think as Mercury and Venus are in Capricorn, we're in this Mercury retrograde. Like I've been saying, this is the time to really rethink everything, change your mindset around certain things. I think as that moon shines Mercury and Venus, this is gaining some, stability and some help with everything. Like Mercury and Venus in Capricorn, Venus is at the very tail end of Capricorn here, but the moon making a trine to it is creating a lot of comfort, creating a lot of stability, creating like a lot of wealth, feeling wealthy in whatever area this is at in your chart for you. But the square to Saturn is, there's some limits to it, right? It's like, maybe you make a bunch of money, but you also have to pay a bigger, load of taxes for it. Maybe you, are working on this project and it's all going good. However, there are certain things that, are kind of getting in your way. Those certain things getting in your way being some type of an authority figure, some type of, time, some type of, again, Saturn and Aquarius stuff, mental block. But then the moon is going to go into Gemini. And what's important about this is by late Monday afternoon, Venus will enter Aquarius. I almost pointed over here. And so as Venus enters Aquarius, I really actually like this Venus transit because it's just going to be Venus with Saturn. And I've talked a lot about Venus and Saturn getting along in a lot of good ways. Venus rules Libra, Saturn's exalted in Libra. So they have this kind of relationship together. Venus likes playing by the rules. Venus likes commitment. Venus likes tradition in a lot of ways. And I think as Venus goes into Aquarius, this is kind of like getting a little weird. Now, I'll be talking about this next week, but next week we'll have Venus squaring Uranus. And the big thing here is that like Venus in Aquarius, when you look up like Aquarius stuff, it's always like, you're weird, you're different. And I think that's so not true. Like Aquarius is the most antisocial social person. Like the Aquarius in the room is always the quiet person that's at all of the parties. The quiet person that's at all of the functions. Like I just think of my stepdad. He has every planet in Aquarius except the moon. Like literally sun, moon, Venus, Mars, sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, all in Aquarius. And it's so funny because he's so popular, and he's always at like social events, but he's so like he's like just antisocial. Like he's just kind of like awkward or whatever, but everyone loves him and he's always around people. And so as Venus is in Aquarius, there's this sort of, we're talking about pleasure, we're talking about indulgence, we're talking about connection. And this is in Aquarius. I hate to say the word because I've told you guys before, I think the word community is just really overused nowadays, and they're just, it almost means nothing because everyone's just like, create your own community. But they just want you to find, like it's all been just very dividing in my opinion, rather than like actually building community. But Venus is about connection and bringing things together. And as she goes into Aquarius, we're talking about people, we're talking about societies, we're talking about ideas. And I think there's this much more, one way to look at this is like finding people in your tribe, finding people to connect to, finding the people that agree with you on things. And I think the hard part about this is, and this is, one of my own personal challenges, is in this modern society that we have, there are so many barriers to entry for creating community. There's all this disagreement with everything that's gone on the past few years, and there's all these sensitive topics that people are afraid to talk about. And there's also the online world where it's just easier to find connection through social media, which is a very Aquarian thing. Aquarius rules the internet. So, you could look at this as enjoying your friends on the internet, connecting more with people through social media. My big issue with that is that you're not actually, those aren't genuine connections. Like, I think we need more genuine one-on-one or just in-person real life connections with people. So, if this is kind of calling out to you, I would really recommend, finding more people to relate to, connecting more with a bigger friend group, a bigger network of people that, share the same ideas or have the same philosophy or have the same goals. That's something that I'm really going to be working on during this time. But the moon goes into Gemini and immediately trines Venus when she enters. So this is kind of like all of a sudden, it's like, maybe you have a certain niche topic you're into, like astrology, for example. And, maybe you go to your first like astrology meetup or something like that. And all of a sudden it just kicks off. The moon in Gemini is we're conversing, we're talking, we're relating, we're connecting with people. And so Monday looks really good, I think, for making those connections with people, enjoying bigger groups of people, enjoying society again. Now, Saturn is still in Aquarius. So there is still this like heaviness, and there is still this kind of like, again, kind of walking on eggshells here with this. And that's something that you'll see more and more of once we get to Venus conjoining Saturn. But at the same time, Mercury's retrograding in Capricorn. We still have Mars retrograding. This is still doing things different. So this isn't necessarily like, here's all of these new things, here's all of this new stuff, but much more of maybe connecting with people that you already have, maybe hitting up resources and relationships that you already have around you and just making those connections again with people. So this looks really positive. I think, what was the other thing that was on Monday? Oh yeah, that's really it. So anyway, we'll jump into Tuesday. And on Tuesday, the moon will make a conjunction to Saturn. The moon will make a conjunction to Mars, and Venus will make a sextile to Jupiter. So I really like this for a lot of reasons. The moon's going to be conjoining Mars, so there is this frustration. Like, again, with the moon in Gemini conjoining Mars retrograde, it's kind of like when you talk to people and you meet people, and maybe someone says something that kind of like slightly like you don't agree with. I think this would be one of those days to not like, I get so frustrated when people get offended over every little thing. And I know that sounds very stereotypical of me and what image sometimes people paint of me, but it's just more of like, it's your choice to be offended. And, I get offended at things all the time, but what I don't do is I don't make it everyone's problem. Like someone can say something that I'm offended to, but that's my issue. That has nothing to do with them. That's my own personal issue. But nowadays it's like, oh, you said something offensive. You don't deserve to have a job. You don't deserve to have rights and X, Y, and Z. And so I think as the moon's on top of Mars, dealing with ways of frustration when it comes to communicating with people and sharing ideas. Like, because we are talking about the moon, right? We are talking about our sensitivity, our emotions. It's connecting to Mars, frustration, fights, conflicts, and Mars is retrograde in Gemini. It's like, I get frustrated all the time when I hear people talk about astrology and they don't really know what they're talking about. Now, don't get me wrong, astrology has all types of things going on with it. But, who am I to sit here and be like, oh, you're like, and attack them for that. Like, I can find a positive way to maybe educate them or offer them a different perspective of things. But I think the challenge on Tuesday is just to not emotionally, just let things out. You know what I mean? Over the past couple of months with Mars retrograde, the things that were very divisive about a year ago no longer seem to be as divisive because people are kind of starting to realize how irrational some of their positions were on some of the things. And we're going to start seeing more of this trend of forgiveness and more of this trend of openness with Saturn going into Pisces. So I really think as the moon's on Mars on Tuesday, giving yourself that space to just know that there might be some things that are said, that are shared, that frustrate you or that kind of piss you off or that offend you. But that's your problem if you're offended. It's not necessarily the other person's problem. Now, if they're like attacking you, that's a whole nother thing. But The other thing that's going on though is Venus is going to make a sextile to Jupiter. And what I like about this is that, like, Venus in Aquarius, let me just be real here. I think both sides of the perspectives of kind of everything that's happened over the past 2 years has made both sides very anxious about talking to people. One side is very like, oh my God, everyone's a disease spreader, and I don't want to get sick, and X, Y, and Z. And then the other side is like, I literally lost my job. I wasn't allowed to see my family. People were saying that I shouldn't have my rights and that they should put me in internment camps. And I think there's been a lot of social anxiety. Like, I shouldn't even say I think. I know there's been a lot of social anxiety. So, I know most of you that watch this are pretty much in somewhat of agreement of what I say. I know not everyone is. But this is one of those things where with Venus in Aquarius sextiling Jupiter in Aries is kind of getting over that fear. Something, because I know people that are still scared to death to go outside and go into, small rooms with people. And then there's people like me where I have felt so, chastised and attacked by society for, the things that I did or that I think. And, also being like a white man, like it just, when you go into these social groups, it's like, my existence is the reason why everything is wrong, and I'm responsible for slavery, and I'm toxic masculinity and all of that fucking nonsense. So there is a lot, like, I deal with a lot of social anxiety because of that. And there is this sort of like, how do I step into this? And this is something that I'm working on myself. But something I like about Venus sextiling Jupiter in Aries is just like kind of getting over that. Venus in Aquarius, it's like sometimes it's just good to be with people and not worry about, what everyone's thinking or what people think of you. And, I'm not perfect at that. Like, that's something that I, still struggle with over everything. But Jupiter's in Aries. Again, there's this sense of like, when we're talking about faith, belief, optimism, it's in Aries, the sense of confidence, the sense of action, the sense of just taking things on. And Venus in Aquarius is like, that could look like going into a group of people and just having a good conversation where that confidence gets restored, or, hanging out with people and connecting with people that you agree with on a lot of things and feeling that sense of confidence coming up. Now, my only issue with that is the moon's going to be conjoining Mars, so I don't think there's any way out of the like communication or the or like the communication and the relating causing maybe some kind of strife. But as Venus sextiles Jupiter, I think this is like, or for example, if you're someone that deals with a lot of insecurity and anxiety and just social anxiety, period, like Jupiter and Aries with Venus sextiling, this is an excellent day to just like, get over it. And not just get over it. Like, people are going to be like, oh, Cameron, I can't get over it. You don't understand. But what I'm trying to talk about here is last week I said with Jupiter and Aries, like, confidence comes from action. So like, if you aren't a social person and you deal with social anxiety, well, guess what? If you don't meet people and you don't go out, that social anxiety is only going to increase. But if you just put yourself out there and you keep connecting with people and you just get over your fears and do it anyway, again, no fear and do it anyway, I think you're going to see a lot of those anxieties wash away. I think this is an excellent time to put yourself into, groups of people, connect with people. This could look like social media as well, since, even though I kind of think that we need to be a little bit more balanced about our real lives and our social media lives. However, for some people, that's just, it might be just connecting more with social media groups. And the moon conjoining Mars, that it might be hashing some problems out, but this might even feel good to talk about like your stresses or talk about things that have pissed you off. And so Tuesday looks pretty positive for the most part. I'm really liking it. So then we get to Wednesday, and then the moon will make a trine to Saturn, but square Neptune. I honestly like this. Like, I think after we've had Mars retrograding through Gemini squaring Neptune and everything, that we thought was real wasn't, and there's been a lot of different opinions about things. I think the moon in Gemini trining Saturn is like having healthy conversations with people. You know what I mean? Like, I talked a lot about this in Libra season of like making connections to the other side, extending your hand, extending that olive branch. And the moon in Gemini trining Saturn is like, sometimes it is good to have these connections and to talk to people that you're not going to always have that, and again, the analogy I've been using, I use this a lot technically last year around Libra season, but it was like during the Civil War. They're like the North and South were killing each other, but then there was like little secret groups of people that were trading tobacco and coffee. It's like even they didn't have a way out of not interacting with each other. And it's not like they had like, I'm sure they might have had like guns during the time, but they weren't like threatening to kill each other. They both had something that they each wanted. And I think that moon in Gemini trining Saturn is an excellent day to just have those connections that connect, or have those conversations that connect you with people. And And the kicker is that the moon will then square Neptune, where I think you might be more surprised than you will be than you expect in terms of like, there's people that I've talked to that I'm like, oh, like I have an idea of someone in my head and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to like them. They're not going to like me. And then you talk to them, I'm like, oh, I fucking love this person. Like they're super sick. And that moon square Neptune might kind of get you, I mean, in one way it might look like, your expectations aren't always reality. And you might kind of, realize where maybe you were seeing things in a diluted way and where maybe you had this certain idea of someone or something, and that changes after these conversations. But I think another way to look at it is also kind of looking at like the moon square Neptune is like, what else do you not know? What else are you, under a false illusion under? And, after the moon, it's like the moon trines Saturn and squares Neptune almost exactly at the same time, where there is this kind of connection. And, Neptune distorts, right? So there is this kind of level of distorting what you thought you know. And that moon in Gemini squaring Neptune might even be like someone saying something very under the surface that you might read into a little bit too deep. I don't know if that's really the case with this one. Like what I really like about this is that this just seems much more of like having these good conversations, connecting more with people. It's still Venus and Aquarius. And squaring Neptune is just kind of like, you walk away, for example, like if you're someone that deals with social anxiety and maybe you go and meet people or you talk to people or you go hang out with your friends and you come back and you realized where you weren't actually seeing that picture correctly because now you have the new information. So I really like this on Wednesday. Now, as we go into Thursday, the moon is going to go into Cancer and is going to square Jupiter. And this is where the week really shifts. It's like the first 3 days of the week are one vibe and then the rest of the week is a completely different other vibe. As the moon goes into Cancer, the full moon in Cancer is great, in my opinion, even though it's in my 8th house. So there's some uncomfortabilities I have with it. But the moon going into Cancer is our emotions, our body, how we feel, what we're connecting to. It's in its home sign. It feels its most comfortable, right? Like it's hard to, like if you were at your friend's house, let's say your friend left for the weekend and you were house watching them. Like you wouldn't feel comfortable walking around naked in that house, right? Versus if you're in your own house, like it's your own house. You walk around naked and do whatever the fuck you want. And that moon in Cancer is kind of like feeling that comfortability, like feeling that sense of security, feeling that sense of safety, feeling like you've been protected in some sort of manner. Now, the problem is that it's going to square Jupiter in Aries. So there is this level of, balancing between, again, Jupiter in Aries is all of this confidence and all of this, bravado. And it's like, maybe you don't like maybe if you have insecurities about your body or your weight or your image, maybe you don't need to go to a nude beach and be naked in front of everybody, but like maybe just being more naked around your house and feeling a little bit more comfortable. Because I feel like this Jupiter and Aries thing is like, again, there's a lot of confidence here and taking action is going to install a lot of that confidence and a lot of that capability. But as the moon makes this square to it, it's kind of like prioritizing, just, gripping it and ripping it. Or, I think as the moon's in Cancer, really prioritizing what your needs are. With Jupiter and Aries, it's like, for example, what's a good example of this? It's like, you can't just go ham all day. Like a big part of, taking care of your body, a big part of work and all that stuff is like rest. And this is a full moon. So like, this isn't necessarily like the time to rest, but I'm talking about like, you need to rest. Like that is something that you legitimately need, even though like, I mean, for me, if idealistically speaking, I would love to not have to sleep or do anything like that. If I just had the energy to go and go and go, I'd love to do that. But I also love sleep. And so I think as the moon's in Cancer and it makes the square to Jupiter and Aries on Thursday, there's this kind of balance of like, okay, how do you push yourself to be more confident and where do you need to really take more action in order to install those beliefs while also balancing? Because this is a square, right? Like some people think of a square and they're like, oh my God, people, gosh, you guys are just so like negative about your birth charts. Like almost, I get clients all the time. They're like, this is the worst birth chart you've ever seen, huh? And I'm like, no, it's not actually. I've seen charts 10 times worse than this. And people just think it's a square, an opposition, so it must be bad. And that's not necessarily the case. Like, for example, like if you have a bunch of yes men around you, you're never going to be able to see where you're wrong or where you can grow or where you can develop. Versus if you have people that are willing to challenge your positions, if you have people that are willing to, make you look at things through a different perspective, that's going to allow you that, again, that's like the Capricorn stuff. It's like when you have these certain limitations in these blocks, like that's where you have that creative space versus if you're just around everyone that's, always completely agreeing with you specifically, not just even some of your beliefs, but Like, you don't want a bunch of yes people around you. And even for yourself, you don't always want to be like, I'm the shit, I'm the boss. You got to be able to check yourself and ask, okay, what is the more appropriate here? And I think as the moon squares Jupiter and goes into Cancer, and this is building up for the full moon, right? So we're really like the full moon is going to be about like realizing our needs and taking care of those needs. And I think as it squares Jupiter, there's this nice balance of, hey, if I want to install this confidence here, I also have to take care of this. Like, you can't just do, like, for example, if you want to get ripped and work out, like, you can't just go to the gym all day long and not pay attention to the food that you eat and not get enough sleep. And, also too, when you just talk about like emotions, like the emotions are so important. If you're not like checking your emotions and where they're at and what you're feeling, and if you're just casting them off to the side, like that's what causes disease. Like if you're upset about something and you're just like, oh, let me push that down, let me push that down, like that literally causes disease, that causes resentment, that causes revenge, and turns into negative things down the road. So I think it's really important to check in with your emotions and how you're feeling on Thursday. And again, it's not about stopping all of your momentum, but asking, now that I have this momentum, what are my needs now? So then as we go into Friday, I feel like this is actually going really quickly here. This is when we have the full moon in Cancer, and it's going to be sextiling / trining Uranus. It's about 1 degree off, so it's not exact, but here's the thing. With this full moon in Cancer, the full moon in Cancer is about like necessity, taking care of our needs. In Capricorn season, we're dealing with like the bare minimum, right? Like I always think about bones and salt during Capricorn season, living off the bones, evolutionarily, like this is like, the crops aren't there. It's the dead of winter now. Maybe 20,000 years ago when we were all hunting megafauna, there would have been more food, but it also would have been much more colder and much more difficult to do things with. And I think with this full moon in Cancer is like, let's prioritize our needs. Like, no, this isn't about doing, everything and getting this and getting that, but what needs to be done right now? And the big part about this is by Saturday, we're going to be having the Mercury Cazimi. So there's this realization that happens. Mercury's retrograding in Capricorn. We're shifting our mindset. We're changing the plan, all of that kind of good stuff. And, Mercury's pretty much combust right here. So it's a little bit like not putting the pieces together. But with the full moon, this is kind of realizing maybe you're not putting the pieces together because you're not prioritizing your needs. Like we all want and desire things, but you don't need those. What is actually of necessity? And this could be something like rest. This could be something like connection. This could be something just like feeling emotionally replenished, right? And I think, as everything's in Capricorn, when we're so focused on being in it, like, for example, when it comes to like the manufacturing line, like, Henry Ford was the guy that invented the 8-hour work week. And it's so funny seeing, like, I see social media posts that are like, the 8-hour work week is so bad and so toxic. And like, don't get me wrong. Like I agree with that in a lot of ways, but I don't agree with it in one way because like before that, it was like you worked all 7 days. You might get Sunday off and it was 12-hour shifts versus Henry Ford. Then now that he had this streamlined system where he can get a lot more done, he can say, look, why don't we do an 8-hour work week and you get 2 days off Saturday and Sunday. And so that's the kind of Capricorn Cancer axis that we're talking about here. It's like when you can streamline your system, when you can develop that system that's going to be good for you, that's how you can then take care of your needs. Because if you're just going Jupiter and Aries and all day, every day, just non-stopping with whatever it is that you're doing, you're not going to have that space to take things on. But if you want to do things all day, every day, and you want to have this expansion of Jupiter and Aries and have that confidence, have that capability, you need to streamline it. You need to figure out a system for it. You need to have an order of operations. And as you figure out, and as again, Mercury's retrograding in Capricorn, we're going over this configuration of our system. We're redoing our system. And once we do that, we're going to go, well, now what are my needs? If your system is like, for me right now, I'm really working on like the best schedule I can have throughout like the week and really maximizing my time with my work. And around this time, it's going to be like, okay, now that I've gotten this system, now that I'm in the middle of the system, what time do I have and what, a space can I have to allow me to take care of the things that I do need to do? Like whether that's just go out and be in nature, even though it's Colorado. I'm not going to go out in nature during the snow. I'm a California boy. I can't do that type of shit. But, and I think also too, this might even be one of those moments where you just kind of realize where, not everything is about like the outcome and not everything is about the, you know, and again too, like I was just watching like a little short documentary about like the first coffee break, which apparently the first coffee break, and I don't know how true this is, but like started here in Denver, and it was like during the middle of the war. There was some Thai company that was here, like something Weavers or something like that. I forgot what it was. And, you know, the women were doing this, but they weren't getting as much output. And they were like, what can we do to get more output from you guys? And they were like, give us a coffee break from like at 10 a.m. and at 4 p.m. And of course, you know, when you talk about caffeine and how that's literally a drug, and they were able to like double their output in just a short amount of time. And so like, it is important to take breaks. It is important to rest. Like something I cannot stand about astrologers is anything, whether it's an eclipse, whether it's a Mars retrograde, whether it's, they'll just like rest, take a break, breathe. Half of you literally do nothing most of the time. And not every bad transit is about rest and relax, because most of you aren't doing enough, in my opinion. This is one of the only transits that I would argue, yeah, maybe not even just rest, but, you know, because rest, just sitting there on the couch is not necessarily resting, you know, but focusing on what your needs are. And maybe that is like, again, getting a better night's sleep, making sure you have enough time to eat your food, making sure you're getting like, you know, your proper nutrition. But again, my only issue why I don't think this is necessarily rest is that it's a full moon. So it's like, you know, people usually stay up later during a full moon. There's always a lot more energy going on during a full moon. So that's why I'm not like, oh, you should totally rest, but just prioritize your needs for a moment. And do that by, you know, for some people, they're like, you know, I've been working too hard and I need to do this and this and that. This goes for me too. We do not work hard enough. We are, especially if you're an American, if you are working 12 hours a week doing hard manual labor, then you get the right to say that you work really fucking hard. But besides that, and this is not like, you know, disowning people. Again, you guys probably do work hard, but this comparison of like, oh, I work so hard and I need to take all this rest time. It's like, no, you just need to have a better system in place. Like it is possible to get more out of doing less. But it's about streamlining that system. And this is why I'm saying all this stuff, because this is this Mercury retrograde in Capricorn. Like if you are getting burnout from all of the work that you're putting in, that means it's not sustainable. So that means it's not going to work. So how can you get maximum output with minimum input? That's what a lot of this Mercury retrograde is about, developing the system for that. And again, you can have the pedal to the metal and go as fast as you want, but you have to have a plan, right? Like if your plan is to go from, let's say like I'm from, you know, the IE, let's say your plan is to go from Riverside to LA, but you're not thinking about, but you're going to leave on Monday at a 5 p.m. or let's say actually Monday at like 8 a.m. Well, you can hit that pedal to the metal as fast as you want, but you're not going to go anywhere fast at all. But if you have a system and a plan of saying, okay, well then I'm going to actually go around that 12 p.m. time where there's not a lot of traffic. And, you know, in between that time, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You can get to your destination a lot faster, with a lot less output, right? Or with a lot less input. So I look at this as just a time of really like saying, what is of necessity? What do I need? What do I need to take care of here in order to have that maximum output, right? Like, because if you're just doing 12 hours a day, nonstop, full throttle, you know, like construction workers do this. Like, they fucking live off of, you know, like gas station food and coffee and shit like that. And they destroy their bodies and shit like that. And that's just not sustainable all the way. It's why you see a lot of them with all these health issues and, you know, they smoke and you get all these diseases later on. And so I think it's just going to be important to really tune in and check in on Friday of like, what do I need to take care of? What are my needs? And how will these needs also maximize my output, right? Like, because if you are, for example, if you're at work and you're so worried about what your home life is like, what's going on in your personal life, you're not going to get any work done. But if you can handle all of that stuff, and if you can at least take care of it for a moment to where it's handled, then you'll actually have the time and energy to focus on your work. So that's what I see a lot of Friday as. I mean, it is a Friday. It's a Friday night. Maybe this would be good for going out. Maybe this would be good for like making those connections with people again. Like, just take it, like, again, maybe we've been so caught up in the holiday season, taking care of family. Maybe it's time to see some friends. Maybe it's time to just take care of some stuff. That's what I have to say about that. So as we go into Saturday, though, that's when the moon is going to make a trine to Neptune. It will then ingress into Leo and make a trine to Jupiter as we have the Mercury Cazimi. So Saturday's kind of got a lot of moon action going on, but a lot of Saturday is about the realization and the clarity. And this is why I prefaced all this with the full moon in Cancer bit that I just did. Because with Mercury Cazimi, this is that light bulb moment of going, oh, this is what needs to change. Oh, if I just got 8 hours of sleep, I'd have all this energy to be doing things. Oh, if I just took care of my body, I'll have the rest of the energy to do what I need to do. And that Mercury Cazimi moment, it's like, we've been changing our plan, we've been changing our infrastructure, we've been changing our system. We have that full moon in Cancer where it's like, you need to pay attention to what you need to do. Like for some of you, you might get really burnt out and just on Friday collapse and be like, dude, I need to fucking take a break. This Mercury Cazimi is like that Saturday you wake up and you're like, that's exactly what I needed. I needed to replenish myself. I needed to focus on what's going to make me feel the best. And now that I've seen that, now I know how to implement that into my system. And what I mean by that is like, now that you've had that, like again, with it comes to like the coffee break analogy that, or the story that I just told, it's like, you know, if I was the CEO of that company, I just gave these women coffee and they started doing more. I'm like, oh, well, no fucking shit. That worked more. That did better because now that they have the energy to do that shit. And so I just think there's a click on Saturday of like, oh, it's just that easy. I just have to like, you can't get Capricorn without the Cancer. Like you can't do all of this hard work and, you know, like just hustle, grind all the time without having your necessities taking place. They're literally at opposition with each other. There has to be a balance there. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. Like this is why, like, you know, for example, a lot of people leave their jobs because they hate their bosses and they don't really take care of their employees versus there's places that really take care of their employees, create this nice work environment, and they get a lot of output out of that. And so on Saturday, during this Mercury Cazimi, during this moment of realization and realizing what's going to work, the moon's going to make this trine to Neptune, where what I like about that, well, there's nothing I don't like. I guess what I'm struggling with is when you talk about Neptune and Pisces and you are talking about illusion and fantasy, the moon in Cancer trining Neptune might be like, over idealizing your rest, or over idealizing, you know, what your necessities are. But I think there's another part of like really romantic, like again, like fucking, it's like romanticizing your coffee break, like romanticizing your lunch break or whatever it is. But there's also another part of it that's kind of like having a little bit more clarity on the picture. Because again, what I like about Neptune and Pisces, I've been a lot more positive about Neptune and Pisces these days. Even, don't get me wrong, I have plenty to say bad about it. But I feel like I've said a lot of that and I need to be more positive about it. But a lot of Neptune and Pisces is like, you know, if Pisces is that mind, body, spirit connection, you know, being in tune to your spirit, being connected with your spirit, and Neptune kind of distorts that. I think the moon in Cancer trining Neptune is kind of like, oh, if I just take care of myself and I, you know, take care of my body and have these necessities, that mind, body, spirit becomes clearer and it becomes enhanced, right? Like there is like, you know, I was listening to a Quentin Tarantino like clip and he just talks about like the magic of movies and how, you know, in cinema, it's just still pictures, but when you play them very fast at, you know, at like 24 frames per second, it creates this, you know, it creates a motion picture, and that's a part of the magic of movies. And there is a part of movie magic that is very elusive and deceitful. But there's another part where, you know, when it's done right, it all comes together and you can see the picture a lot more clearly because there's a certain image, there's a certain, you know, story that they're trying to tell, and they have to tell it in the right way with the right framing, with the right colors, with the right lighting, with the right script. And so I think as the moon's in Cancer trining Neptune, this is seeing that kind of movie magic almost in a sense, but more so of like, in your own personal life of like, wow, I just took care of all of these things. It's trining Neptune. I'm starting to get a lot more clear. And when I say, I don't even mean clear, but I mean enhanced, because Neptune is like you ever taken Molly? Like, God, Molly is, I'm not, like, if you've never done it, you don't want to do drugs, I'm very on board with people not doing drugs, but Molly is fucking fun. And it enhances everything. Like, I mean, just laying down feels good. Like squishy, soft velvet feels super good. Everything looks really beautiful. And that's kind of like what's going on here when I mean like enhanced. And maybe not necessarily like you're on a drug, but like your experience of mind, body, spirit connection is enhanced through just taking care of stuff. And so I really like this trine for the most part. But then as we get later on into Saturday, the moon's going to then enter Leo and make this trine to Jupiter. And that looks awesome. It's like, dude, I got my rest. I'm like, I took care of my needs. now now I'm fucking ready to go. Now it's Saturday afternoon, maybe you want to run some errands, you want to take care of this, maybe go get a fucking haircut. Haircuts are good for waning moons, and also the moon will be separating from Jupiter and applying to Venus on Saturday afternoon, Sunday, so that would probably be a good day for a haircut, if you're interested. But that moon going into Leo, making that trine to Jupiter, is, I think, instilling that confidence again, because again, Jupiter in Aries is that, taking action builds that belief. Building that confidence takes, just repetitive action and just fully investing in it. And I think as the moon in Leo trines it, it's easier. Like that moon in Cancer squaring it is like, I want to put all my energy in this, but I'm malnourished, or I'm not hydrated, or I'm not taking care of myself here. But then once the moon goes into Leo and trines Jupiter, it's like, wow, now that I've gotten this rest, now that I've taken care of business, I'm ready to go. Like I have this confidence, I have this pride, I have this, putting my heart on my sleeve of like feeling a lot better about going about it. So I really like Saturday for a lot of reasons. I love this full moon because it's like not just it's the full moon and then immediately the Mercury Cazimi, where it's like full moon. What does the full moon do? It lights up the night. It lights up the dark, what you don't always get to see. And what sign is it highlighting? The sign of needs, the sign of, connection, the sign of taking care of things and protecting. It's like the mama bear sign. And this is one of those moments where it's like full moon of like, oh, I just need to realize this. And then Mercury Cazimi, where you go, it just feels, that sense of clarity just hits you. It's really exciting in my opinion. Like, I think last year I was making fun of this full moon in Cancer of being a lot more sad. But this one's not. I think this one feels good. And then we get into Sunday, and the moon is going to make an opposition to Venus while Mercury trines Uranus. And the party just continues, in my opinion. The big thing here is, again, the moon's going to separate from Jupiter, but then go opposite Venus. So, again, the moon's making a contact to Venus. It's good. It's connecting. It's separating from a benefic, going to another benefic. It's textbook good. What might not necessarily be the best about it is that it's Venus in Aquarius, so it's like we all have to be equal. We all speak the same volume and speak of the same things, versus like the moon in Leo opposite Venus in Aquarius is like if you're like, I feel like I'm fucking making fun of myself here, but like every now and then, like I don't make myself the center of attention. I just often become that because I'm a fucking Leo. But that moon in Leo opposite Venus in Aquarius is balancing out, your own like need for recognition and your own need to be seen versus what everyone else needs to. And I think a negative way that this can be manifested is like just being like, I'm tired of talking about everyone else. I want to talk about me. Like, what's that? I think it's a Toby Keith song. I want to talk about me. I want to talk about I. But the moon going opposite Venus is just kind of like your emotion, like the moon in Leo, like emotionally you need that recognition. You need that kind of validity. I was like, that's not the right word. But it's opposite Venus in Aquarius. I think if you want to be seen, put others in the spotlight, right? Like you kind of have to be the change that you want to see in the world. And so one of the ways that can look in this kind of example is like, if you want to if you want people to recognize you and your greatness, show the greatness in everybody else, especially like the quiet people in the back that don't get that recognition. Like speak up about them, bring attention to them. Maybe not in a bad way where they're like, don't look at me, but like acknowledge their greatness, and that will come back to you. Like whatever you put out in the world is going to come back 3 times back. And so if it's like you're needing that recognition, or maybe you're just feeling good about yourself on Sunday, pour that into other people. Pour that into the people that are around you. Whether that's your friends, whether that's your roommates, your family, whatever it is, I think this is an excellent time to just give what you have. Give what you would like to have, I think is a better way to do it. What was the other thing on Sunday? Oh, and Mercury trines Uranus. Yes. So the succession of insight continues. It's like Friday we have the full moon, Mercury, on Saturday we have the Mercury Cazimi, and then by the time we get to Sunday, Mercury's going to make this trine to Uranus, where I talked about this while Mercury was in shadow, I believe 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago. But Mercury in Capricorn, trining Uranus and Taurus, it's like, oh, brilliant insight, like solution oriented. Like now, again, Uranus and Taurus, so we're being innovative and creative about what our values are and what we find stability in. Mercury in Capricorn in shadow is like, again, writing the plans out, seeing what would need to change. Mercury trines Uranus, we're like, oh, that's the solution. That's what's going to work for me. Mercury goes retrograde and trines Uranus, where there is this sort of, I don't look at this as a bad way at all, but I look at this as revisiting that insight and asking, you know, how can we make that better? Like this looks good. Again, I love Mercury's trining Uranus, but it's a retrograde Mercury trining Uranus where this is like coming back to that moment and maybe having another insight about that. So think again, maybe what was going on. I think this would have been like 3 weeks ago where we had Mercury in shadow trining Uranus. But now that Mercury's retrograde trining Uranus, it's like, you know, maybe you did something creative. Maybe you did something, you know, intuitive. Maybe you just like did something that came to your mind and it worked right then and there. But as you come back to it, you're like, all right, what worked about that and what didn't work about that? Again, Mercury retrogrades are about reflecting and reviewing. So like, did that work or did that not work? And if it did work, what can you enhance about it? And if it didn't work, what lessons can you take from that? You know what I mean? Like something that in the spiritual world, so many people are just like, bad things don't exist, and like just they make bad situations and negative situations and they just like whitewash them, and it's like negative and bad situations are good. You are supposed to learn something from them. Just like, for example, when you're a little baby and you're a little kid and you go up to a beehive and you get stung by a bee, you don't go, oh my God, I'm stung by a bee, my life is ending. You go, holy fuck, I'm never going to do that again. I learned my lesson. And this is Saturn stuff that we're talking about. So learning lessons, I think, is the MO here. But I think a big part of this is like if there is this, if, again, enhance the good parts about it. But if there was something bad, learn the fucking lesson so you don't repeat it again, so you don't get stung again. Like, it's amazing. So many people know the saying now of like, you know, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result is like the definition of insanity. Literally, I know almost everyone I know knows that saying, but half of those people still just do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. And then they're like, yeah, that's the definition of insanity, but they don't actually see how that's a part of their life. And, you know, I don't want to say who am I to be speaking, but like, I'm a human being too. That's a stupid lesson that I always have reoccurring for me is like, you know, trying something over again, being too stubborn and not getting out of my own way to do something different. So I think as Mercury's retrograding, trining Uranus, I think this is an excellent time to just like, again, enhance the good out of it, reflect on the bad so you don't do it again. Then we get to next week. Next week, look at this. Are you ready? Venus is going to trine Mars. We love that. We already had the Venus-Mars opposition. When was that? Yeah, we had the Venus-Mars opposition. Now Mars is going to station direct. And Venus trines Mars and then it immediately stations direct. So this is really good. I really, really like this transit. And then Venus squares Uranus, where things get a little weird. Not in a bad way, I don't think, but it is going to be weird, I think is the best way to put it. But I can't believe Mars stations direct next week, guys. Mars has been, again, in Gemini since late August, all of September, all of October, stationed retrograde at the very end of October. All of November it was retrograde, all of December it was retrograde. And now we're in the third week of January, and it finally stations direct. And then we'll get all of February of Mars in Gemini, all of the rest of January of Mars in Gemini, all of February of Mars in Gemini, and then all of March with Mars in Gemini. So we're not done yet, but we are done with the reviewing and the reflecting process. So as far as my final thoughts, guys, I think this is just, I feel like I was pretty clear about it, but just taking care of yourself this week, figuring out what necessities you can take care of that are going to enhance your workflow, that are going to enhance everything else that you're doing. I really think that's the way to go about this week. So with that being said, I love and appreciate every single one of you guys, and I'll be seeing you next week.